Welcome back. The New York Community Trust announced $9.9 million in grants to 55 nonprofits in New York with a mission to make the city a healthier and more equitable place to live. The Vice President for Grants for the New York Community Trust, Shawn Morehead, and Policy Campaigns Advisor for Banana Kelly Community Improvement Association, Gregory Jost, joins me to discuss this effort. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
It's exciting to be here.
Now, Shawn, can you just tell us a little bit more about the New York Community Trust and can you detail its overall mission?
Sure. So the New York Community Trust is the largest and oldest community foundation for the 8 downstate counties of New York. And if you're anything like me, before I came to the New York Community Trust, you're thinking, what the heck is a community foundation? So a community foundation actually brings together generous New Yorkers, people with resources, and then we help match their interests with the really exciting work that New Yorkers are doing to make our city more equitable and just. So we both raise money for New York and we try to get that money to people who are doing really important work to make our city great.
Now, the NYCT has announced $9.9 million in grants, which is amazing. And on behalf of all of those nonprofits, I want to say thank you because, of course, people in the Bronx are going to benefit from that. Can you just detail what inspired this effort?
So, of course, what inspires us are New Yorkers, right? New Yorkers are out there doing great things, making New York a great place to live, and we just keep getting better and better. But this round of grants was part of what we call our ongoing competitive grants program. So every year we make about $50 million in grants for work that's being done in New York City across a wide range of issues to make it better. And we really focus on grants that will make the public systems that we as New Yorkers rely on better, and particularly better for people who don't have resources and connections to advocate for the improvements they need.
Now, Gregory, I want to know your opinion on this. There's a concentrated effort on environmental justice and health equity. How could efforts like this assist underserved communities, especially in areas like the Bronx?
Yeah, we've been for decades redlined. Our neighborhoods have been places where a lot of highways, a lot of diesel truck. We have highways going through our parks in the Bronx. We have different types of facilities that have a negative impact on people's health. Sometimes that's even conditions in apartments and such, right? Like all these different triggers for people having poorer health outcomes that we saw during the pandemic on display for the world. In the way that it showed up in the data and in people's lives. And so having a concentrated effort from a great funder partner like New York Community Trust makes a huge difference for all of the work that we're doing. There's so many different organizations and efforts that combine into improving health outcomes, improving our neighborhoods, and making sure that those benefits are the people who've been here for a long time as well.
Thank you. Now, Shawn, can you expand on, there are 55 nonprofits. What goes into finding the right nonprofit and deciding, who will actually get some of this funding?
So we actually have an open application process, so people should know that. Any nonprofit can apply for a grant from us anytime. We do read every proposal that we receive. And then I am lucky to work with a team of experts, most of whom came from the nonprofit sector themselves or government. And they work in their areas of expertise to review the request for funding. And then also just to be out in New York, to know what's happening in communities and identify promising opportunities and work that nonprofits are undertaking. So it really is about that team of New Yorkers who have worked here, many of them for decades, really trying to find the best way to use the resources that we have.
Now, Banana Kelly is one of the organizations that will be receiving funding, and your vision for the grant is to create a mutual housing association model. Can you tell me a little bit more about that effort?
Yeah, this is all about community control of housing, of land, which, people recognize this is what we have to do to make sure that as we do work in our neighborhoods and make life and conditions and such better and healthier in all the different kinds of ways, right? Environmentally healthy, economically healthy, all these different ways. We've got to make sure that the folks who've been there in the neighborhoods for a long time, the folks who have been displaced out of other neighborhoods and are ending up in our neighborhoods, right? we get a lot of people from around the city who've been priced out of other neighborhoods coming into the South Bronx. How do we make sure that our neighborhoods stay affordable, at least the housing that we own and control? The Mutual Housing Association model is about having residents have direct control over the housing. So we do it through this model where we have a resident council. So we have about 65, 66 buildings now. And each of those buildings, through tenant association stuff, can have representation. That's the grant, right, is to implement all of this. The model that we did with a lot of our resident leaders was to write the bylaws, which are really important because that governs how we as an organization work, and that there's representation from our buildings on the resident council, and then there's representation from residents on our board of directors. So we have, it's almost like a co-op, but it's a rental. So it's kind of a hybrid between a co-op and a rental, and that's the model that we see really works for us in our neighborhood to make sure that folks who live in the neighborhood have an active voice and are kind of driving the direction of our organization.
And then can you tell us a little bit more about the organization Banana Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, we were started back in the late 1970s through neighborhood residents coming together and saying, like, we're taking a stand for our block. We want to save the housing on our block. And they took over a couple of vacant buildings and renovated them through sweat equity. And so we're still kind of in that model of taking over distressed buildings and renovating them, keeping tenants in place. We've been doing a lot of that work in the last 5 years, like through the pandemic, renovating buildings that the city had been using as shelters and making sure that the folks that were living in those buildings can stay as permanent residents while, you know, like doing like renovations with people in place. So we're about keeping in place, like ending this cycle of displacement that people are finding. Many people who've been displaced are displaced multiple times. So we like to say at Banana Kelly, that cycle of displacement stops with us.
Now, how will this effort on the Mutual Housing Association support environmental health or health equity?
So through the different ways people participate in our resident council, we also have a network of gardens in a lot of our buildings. So we're growing vegetables, we're building up that work as well. Buildings are one of the main, as we know, like polluters, as they say, right? I mean, this is where the work happens in environmental justice, right? And health equity is in the buildings, conditions in your apartment, what's going on. Also, we have, you know, efficient heating systems, like all the ways that fuel is used, and in other areas, water, like water conservation. How do we keep, you know, New York City has combined sewage system. I mean, it's a whole mess of things, right? But how do we keep raw sewage out of the water? It's like this. A lot of this work happens through our buildings, right? Like preventing stormwater runoff. We could go down a long list of different ways that housing is intertwined, right, with health outcomes. They're very, very connected, and especially the land, of course, right? Like, how do we use the land surrounding our buildings?
Right. Thank you so much for clarifying that, because it is so many things affect other things, you know, within our society. So thank you again for kind of like highlighting that. Now, Shawn, the NYCT also plans to direct $1 million toward further supporting efforts towards addressing issues of climate change. What are some of the ways your organization is prioritizing this?
So we actually have had a generous New Yorker decades ago leave us a substantial amount of money to address the environment. And we've been able to use that locally, nationally, and even internationally. But we always are focusing on community. So in the set of grants that we are talking about today, we made a grant to Bronx is Blooming, which is another Bronx-based nonprofit that is focusing on stewardship of green spaces in the Bronx, which of course means better air quality as well as quality of life. We've also been trying to help nonprofits locally take advantage of the influx of federal infrastructure money and climate money that's been coming out of Washington, so that money is actually getting into local communities and benefiting New Yorkers, like Gregory was talking about, so that people are getting jobs and improved living conditions out of that funding.
Now, I also want to expand on that. There's also a focus to assist young people and criminal justice, which I thought was so interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that effort?
Sure. So I'm hoping that what comes across is this theme of really making sure that New Yorkers have voice in the city that we live in. And so we've been making a lot of grants to engage the city's young people in advocacy, and then also for several years have been making grants to engage people who have a history with the criminal justice system in advocacy so that they actually are informing policy decisions about criminal justice reform that brings to bear their life experience. And, you know, young people are spectacularly energetic and thoughtful, and they know the city that they've grown up in. And so giving them those skills not only benefits us today, but also will benefit us far into the future as they become our future city council members and mayors and leaders.
Now, can you both just let everybody know where they can go to learn more about both organizations?
Sure. So the New York Community Trust has a website, nycommunitytrust.org. On that page, you can find lots of information about becoming a donor if you're interested in actually contributing resources to what we do, but also information for nonprofits who would be interested in seeking a grant from us. And it talks about what our priorities are. As I mentioned, we really focus on policy advocacy, systemic reform, less on direct service grant making, although we do some of that too. So check us out.
And Gregory,
Yes.
can you tell people where they
Sure.
can learn more?
Yeah, we're you can look us up, Banana Kelly Community Improvement Association, bkcianyc.org. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but if we're on a lot of social media like Instagram, Banana Kelly BX, so you can find us there as well. And I just want to echo what Shawn was talking about, like that systemic work and really seeing people who, like the young people you said, right, as the experts. People know that's our philosophy too. Like the people in our neighborhoods, our residents, they're the experts. They know what's the best thing. So we're really just grateful for that perspective, that view. That's what is really going to make the difference for the Bronx.
All right. Well, I want to thank you both so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
We have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Open after this.